work salary.
Guys.
Got it? You on it?
Got it.
There it is.
Got it.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining with us here today. We've had a very full and eventful day, being able to get an up-to-date feel for exactly what's going on the border. Obviously, this is the day when Title 42 was expected to be lifted. And we in the governor's office, working with the Texas Department of Public Safety and the National Guard, we began gearing up an operation for the possibility that today Title 42 would no longer be in effect. I have learned that the same is true for local officials. They were gearing up to be prepared to deal with the consequences of the lifting of Title 42. Well, the good news is that a court very correctly ruled that Title 42 should not be lifted, which is a good thing. However, it's only a temporary result. For one, we don't know what the eventual outcome will be with regard to continuing to maintain Title 42, but that point aside, one thing that we know for a fact, and that is there are maybe as many as 100,000 migrants who are across the border waiting to cross into the state of Texas. And we, as a state, we being the local communities represented here in this room today, they're all dealing with the enormous challenge of having a tidal wave of people come into the communities. And so we've spent the day talking about ways in which we can continue to make sure that we, whether it be at the state level or local level, we are doing everything we possibly can to prevent people from coming across the border into the state of Texas. There are some things that were mentioned today by a person who's with us, and that is the Vice President for the National Border Patrol Council. When he was explaining to us exactly how these operations are working and why they are working that way. As we were out at the river and talking about people crossing across the border at the river as opposed to just using a port of entry. And he was explaining exactly why that was happening. Because as we can see, the Biden administration seems to be letting in people whether they're crossing through the port of entry or across the river, and there have been so many people allowed in because of that. And he explained that people could easily just try to cross at an official port of entry, but they don't for one very simple reason. And that's because they are coming across between the ports of entry because that is what the cartels want to have done. The cartel's goal would not be achieved if people were coming across the border at the port of entry. What the cartels need to accomplish, they need people to be coming across the river between the ports of entry to fully occupy the Border Patrol officers, including the state law enforcement, whether it be the National Guard or the Texas Department of Public Safety. And only when they're fully occupied are the cartels able to get across the border the high valuable assets they want to get across the border, whether it be drugs or special personnel, whatever the case may be. And so this is a battle that's going on with the cartels, where we as a state are increasing our effort to work with the local communities to make sure that we will thwart the cartel's goals to get more people coming across the border. So here's some things that we're doing that you have already seen, but we are increasing these efforts as we speak. One is we want to make it harder for people to get across the border. And this is something that we talked about in a private meeting that we held for more than an hour before coming out here to visit with you. And one of those strategies is increasing the quantity and quality and the types of barriers that we're putting up. A tool that people agree is an effective tool is the concertina wire, which is the razor wire barrier that makes it, if not impossible, it makes it far more difficult for people to cross the border. What typically happens is when people coming across the border encounter that razor wire, they will walk along the border's edge until they get to a point that does not have that razor wire. So part of our goal is to put down more razor wire to make sure that we're filling any gap that would prevent people from crossing across the border into that particular location. Our goal is to make sure that we have that concertina wire in every inch of the border. The only place that we would be prohibited from putting it would be where federal land may be located, or if there's private property where a private property owner does not want it. But we continue to add significantly that process. And then behind the barrier, we have people who will be able to make arrests. One thing we talked about the need to do, and that is to send a message that people who are crossing between the ports of entry, you're subject to arrest and you will be trespassing. And so you can expect more trespassing or do not trespass signs go up, so that we will be able to employ the strategy that we have of arresting people and taking them to jail. It was just 2 weeks ago that the first jury trial that took place in one of these arrests, and the jury convicted the person for aggravated trespass and sentenced them to a year behind bars. And these are substantial penalties for people who are not following the law, people who refuse to follow the law, including the cartels. And of course, in addition to that, we continue to go through the process of arresting smugglers themselves, and the time they're going to spend behind bars is enhanced and increased with the law that I signed this past year to make sure there's going to be a far easier prosecuted felony to prosecute the smugglers that we encounter, that we arrest, and that we will be putting behind bars for a very long time. We also are making available to Eagle Pass, to Maverick County, the ability, if they have a large number of people who are milling around, that we will put them on buses and send them to Washington, D.C. As of today, we've sent 45 buses to Washington, D.C., and there's a whole lot more where that's coming from. We don't want communities like Eagle Pass to be overrun with a large number of migrants who are milling around in the streets, and we want to alleviate that challenge that cities like Eagle Pass are dealing with by putting these people on buses and sending them to Washington, D.C. Another strategy that we talked about that is proving to be very effective. We are working very collaboratively with our partner states across the border. In fact, while I was down on the border today, I talked with a law enforcement official in Mexico about us working together to make sure that we're securing both sides of the border. On top of that, this past Friday, I spoke with all of the neighboring Mexican governors that neighbor the state of Texas about ensuring that they are living up to the agreements that we signed together a month ago to make sure that they, on the Mexico side of the border, are doing their part. And we could visibly see it today. We saw it through a conversation today, but we, more importantly, in reports from the Texas Department of Public Safety and the National Guard, we are seeing that ongoing collaboration. And as was pointed out to me, and especially because of where we are, we're dealing with the states of Coahuila and Tamaulipas. We're finding success in on the Mexico side of the border, disrupting migrant groups before they do arrive at the border, as well as work on what we call mirrored operations. What that means is when we on the U.S. side are conducting a certain operation, on the Mexican side they will be mirroring that very same practice. That leads to greater results and greater border security. I had the opportunity to visit with a lot of officials. I'll name a few, as well as some of the things that we talked about. Spent a lot of time talking to the Eagle Pass mayor, and he thanked us for the opportunity of the city being able to work with both the Texas Department of Public Safety and the National Guard, and said that the influx of people who are coming across the border through points other than checkpoints is an influx that's taking over the community and taking resources away from city residents. There's only so many resources, whether they be law enforcement or medical aid, whatever the case may be. Only so much resources that a community the size of Eagle Pass will have. And the people who are coming across the border are taking up more and more of those resources, which is reducing the amount of those resources for the local community. And that's why they're working with us so much to make sure they're going to be able to take care of their own residents right here. We also had visiting with us State Representative Morales, who has a detailed letter and some detailed plans and strategies, some of which we are employing, some of which we're looking at, to make sure that we're using every tool and strategy we can to make the border safer. We had the sheriffs of Zavala County and Maverick County with us here today. In Zavala County, they had to get a special request from the Texas Division of Emergency Management to have a temporary morgue. They have so many people who have lost their lives whose bodies are in Zavala County that they need assistance with. And that's even before summertime hits. When summertime hits and the heat in the summertime, those numbers are just going to go up. And Texas will have to provide more temporary morgues to deal with the bodies that are found in Zavala County. People in Mexico need to know this. People who are trying to immigrate from across the globe need to know this. There are deceased people who came across the border thinking they were going to be able to have a new life in America, and they lost their life doing so, being completely unaware of how treacherous it can be. And the sheriffs also said, just keep doing what we're doing. And we are working with them, both of these sheriffs, to make sure they are going to have more resources, more personnel, for them to be able to step up and do their jobs to secure their communities. And then same thing goes with regard to the police chief for Eagle Pass, who said that if it wasn't for the Texas Department of Public Safety and the National Guard, they wouldn't really be in the position they're in right now. They would be significantly challenged. And the police chief's suggestion was to build multiple layers of security throughout the community, which is exactly what we want to work with them to achieve. So bottom line of what I have to say is this, and that is we as a state will be continuing to deploy more resources, tools, and strategies that will make it far more difficult for people to be able to cross the border into communities like Eagle Pass, into Maverick County, into Zavala County, and places like that. And this process is made far more effective by all of us working together. Next, we will have the Director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, Steve McCraw.
Thank you, Governor. You made it very clear over a year ago that the Mexican cartels will not have operational control of the Texas-Mexico border. And thankfully, because of the resources, the Texas National Guard, our local partners, and the brave men and women of the U.S. Border Patrol, we've been able to do a number of things you've talked about in terms of being proactive and preventive as opposed to just reactive. And we know that clearly, unfortunately, that certainly U.S. policies and for that matter strategies can impact the cartels, not only in terms of impact in terms of what they're doing, but make it easier for their job. In fact, this current global mass migration event that is occurring, or crisis that we're experiencing here in Texas right now, has empowered them, has given them the ability to push more easily criminals, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, and also counterfeit drugs with fentanyl into and throughout the communities in Texas and the nation. And as a result, people are less secure. Moreover, they reap billions of dollars in creating this mass migration crisis by attracting people in this thing called human trafficking. And make no mistake about it, it's not human smuggling, it's trafficking. They treat people like they're indentured servants when they cross that Rio Grande Valley or the Rio Grande River. Make no mistake about it. And so we appreciate your leadership on this, Governor, and being proactive. And we stand ready with our local partners, National Guard, and certainly with our Border Patrol men and women to do all we can to protect Texas and the rest of the nation.
Sure. Thank you. And now the Vice President for the National Border Patrol Council.
So thank you, Governor. Currently, we have over 50% of our Border Patrol workforce dedicated to transporting, processing, and caring for illegal aliens that came across the border. That means that we're not able to do our job of border security. But thanks to your resources, the Texas National Guard and the DPS troopers, we're able to stay above water. If it wasn't for the state resources, the border would be completely unsecured and the cartels would have absolute control of the border and the border communities. Currently, we're seeing about 7,000 apprehensions per day on the border with Border Patrol. It's estimated that once Title 42 goes away, that we're going to be apprehending about 18,000 apprehensions per day on the border. That's the estimates that the Department of Homeland Security has put out there. At that point, we're not going to have any Border Patrol agents on the actual border. What that means is that border communities like Eagle Pass, Del Rio, and Laredo will continue to suffer by having open borders and not having enough border security. But because of that, sir, we appreciate the efforts on the state, and we appreciate our men and women of law enforcement for doing their jobs on the border.
Thank you very
Governor.
much. Now we have the mayor of Eagle Pass.
Thank you very much, Governor, for visiting our great city of Eagle Pass. I want to start off by thanking all our law enforcement. We've been working for months with Border Patrol, DPS, National Guard, in trying to maintain security for the city of Eagle Pass. That is my number one priority, is the safety and the security of the people of Eagle Pass, Texas. And right now, we don't have that 100% because we have thousands of people crossing from over 100 countries into our community. We do not know who these people are. I constantly get calls from constituents that are worried because they have groups of people walking through their neighborhood, and that is something that is not normal. And I ask for a stronger message from our federal government that we need to tell people that this is a nation of laws, that it is not open border. Eagle Pass, we're a city of 28,000 people. We have limited resources. Every day, our firefighters have to respond to calls of illegal immigrants, dehydration, or they get hurt, and that's taking away, like the governor said, and we spoke about, resources to our constituents. The same with our police officers. They have to respond to calls, and that's taking away from them monitoring our city and making sure that there's no crime in our city. So it is very alarming. We appreciate the help of the law enforcement because honestly, this is getting out of control. And we need a stronger message. I ask for a stronger message, more help from our federal officials up there. And we invite our president, our vice president to come visit us here in the beautiful city of Eagle Pass, because having thousands of people cross that river into Eagle Pass every day, that is not normal. We cannot have that. Eagle Pass cannot sustain that anymore. So thank you. And thank you, Governor, for your help and for visiting us.
Thank you, Mayor. And now the Adjutant General of Texas, General Seltzer.
Thank you, Governor. The Texas National Guard continues to take unprecedented actions to secure the border and support and protect our southern communities. Since the announcement of the elimination of Title 42 about a month and a half ago, we've conducted 30 mass migration response exercises along the southern border of Texas. We've put up about 42 miles of barrier to help protect our southern border. We are working with Department of Public Safety and the Mexican government, as the governor has stated, to do mirror operations, and that includes teaching them how to string concertina wire on their side of the river so that they can help block crossers from getting into the water. We're expanding our maritime packages to include boats that can go into shallow water to help deter and keep people from crossing at low water crossings, and also to interdict illicit narcotics. And as of 0600 this morning, we have a C-130 on alert, and we have 2 contingency response force packages ready to move into the area along the border should it be needed in the event of a civil disturbance. And finally, I would like to thank our local officials for all your support of the Lone Star Soldiers. We've really had great steadfast support here in Eagle Pass as we move out and do a job that really the federal government should be doing. So thank you, Governor.
Thank you, General. Take a few questions.
I have a question about Texas National Guard. I'm Rose Day with Stars and Stripes. I'm curious to know a little bit more about the C-130, where it is and what it's bringing. And also, I understand you've been able to draw down troops at the end of this month. If you could
So for the C-130, it's located in Fort Worth. It's in a alert status. That was in preparation for Title 42 to be dropped. Obviously, that did not occur, but we didn't know what was going to happen today. None of us did. So the purpose there would be to go pick up the contingency response force troops and bring them down to any point along the border to support any kind of civil disturbance that happened.
Governor, when it comes to Operation Lone Star, we have seen hundreds of millions of dollars put into it, but just yesterday, a lot of us were down by the barbed wire on the Rio Grande, able to go around, watching migrants go around. What do taxpayers need to know about what their money is going to?
So I'll be clear, and people need to understand the magnitude of what Operation Lone Star has been able to achieve and what would have happened had Operation Lone Star not been into effect. So Operation Lone Star has now seized almost enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the entire United States of America. That is fentanyl that made it past Border Patrol. That's fentanyl that would be on the streets, not just of Eagle Pass, but in San Antonio and Austin and Dallas. It would be on the streets across the entire country. I can't tell you how many lives have been saved. I can tell you lives have been saved because of the elimination of that fentanyl from our streets. Similarly, if you look at the total number of arrests, which not for trespassing, but arrest of criminals coming across the border as well as others, the amount of safety we were able to achieve, I think it's somewhere between 12 and 14,000 of criminal arrests they have made, including someone who had been convicted of murder, including someone convicted of child rape, including people who are extraordinarily dangerous. And who knows where they would be, what they would be doing. And I did not include the incredible amount of methamphetamine that they were able to seize that would not have been seized that's come across the border. And then there is the deterrence. I can tell you for a fact what the city has said, what the local sheriffs have said, and what they have seen. And that is the concertina wire does play a meaningful effect in two respects. One, it sends a message to the cartels. No one comes across that river without the cartels being involved in it. And the cartels are looking for the easiest way to get people across the river. When they encounter concertina wire, what most of them have to do, they have to walk to a point that could be on federal land or something like that, where they are going to be able to make it around. And so the concertina wire does play a meaningful role, just like a wall plays a meaningful role. It provides a funneling device that makes law enforcement far more effective. And then on top of that, one thing that you perhaps will be seeing here in Eagle Pass, one thing that does exist elsewhere, and that is on the U.S. side of the concertina wire, oftentimes in some locations it is very clear that if you cross that concertina wire, you are trespassing, and that's aggravated trespassing that can lead to a year in jail. And so we are looking to more aggressively up what we're doing and making arrests of people who cross that concertina wire.
Texas is taking the brunt of this, but this is not about Texas. This is about the rest of the U.S. Tell me about that.
Well, you're making a very important point. Right now, Texas has the largest number of people coming across the border. One thing we have found with the implementation of Operation Lone Star, it has shifted cartel activity to New Mexico, to Arizona, to California. And there has been an increase after we created Operation Lone Star and the people crossing illegally into other states. And so, listen, it's a fact. This is our southern border for the United States of America. And with every day that Texas has success, it may mean failure for some other state. That means failure for the United States of America. And as a result, results really won't be attained and achieved until we have a president who's willing to step up and enforce the rule of law. Remember this, it was only a year and a half ago that we had the lowest amount of illegal immigration in decades. And then it only took a year and a half under the current administration to lead to the highest illegal immigration ever. What we need is a president who, once again, will enforce the immigration laws that have been passed by the United States Congress.
The wires being seen, Governor, the wires say about that upcoming wire election?
So listen, the consequences of the border security in the upcoming election have been made clear by the American public. President Biden has something like a 23% approval rating with regard to the border. Americans, whether they live on the border, off the border, or in another state, they're angry about what is going on. Their lives have been disturbed, their country has been disrupted, the rule of law is being ignored. One thing Americans believe in is the rule of law. And to have a president of the United States who refuses to enforce the rule of law is causing the American public to lose faith in that president. And they will be voting for people who do support enforcing the rule of law in our state and in our country.
The wire.
Have you heard
The
anything
wire
from
being seen
President
as
Biden?
something
Have you heard
inhumane,
a word from
cruel.
President Biden? Has he reached out to you at all? Has this failed administration reached out to you to help this community or anybody? Have you heard anything from this failed president?
President Biden has never once even tried to contact me about the border. The czar for the border, Kamala Harris, has never once tried to contact me. My last contact with Secretary Mayorkas was something like in February a year ago. They have no interest in talking to Texas or talking to leaders who are actually on the border. And remember, Joe Biden himself has never even been to the border. We are dealing with a crisis that is man-made by President Biden, who doesn't want to take the time to even come to the border or talk to the governor of a border state.
The wire.
There's a difference between sending buses from Texas over to DC versus the NGOs doing the same thing to basically anywhere USA.
So our goal in sending the buses is to help local communities. The idea arose at a meeting like I had here, but it was in Uvalde. And in Uvalde, they were having these illegal migrants dumped off in their community, and they had no capability of dealing with them. And they talked about having to put them on buses and send them up to San Antonio. I said, I got a better idea. We're going to send them to Washington, D.C. What we're trying to do is we're trying to help communities like whether it be Eagle Pass or Uvalde or Del Rio or all these other communities alongside the border not have to deal with this tidal wave of people in their communities. And so we are a relief valve for those communities by moving the migrants out and getting them to Washington, D.C. And we're up to our 45th bus now. When you add a zero to that, I think Washington, D.C. is going to soon find out they're going to be dealing with the same consequences we're dealing with.
Barbed wire is being seen as something cruel and inhumane. You'll say something about it.
Government, we believe they invest more in Stone Garden.
Say it again now?
Stone Garden,
By the federal government?
yes,
Yeah.
or the state government.
Well,
More than is being allocated.
Federal grants.
say again?
Federal grants, Stone Garden's
Yeah.
federal grant.
Yeah, and so these are federal grants, and so we got to get the federal grants first, and the federal grants will be passed on. So yeah, we're more than happy to pass on any federal grants that are going to be provided to address this. But all I'm finding from the Biden administration is an abject failure and refusal to spend any money on trying to secure our border.
Barbed wire is being seen as something inhumane, cruel.
The neighboring Mexican governors as a success, because we've been spending time on the Mexican side, we've been documenting constant migrant groups continue to come in. The Mexican law enforcement wasn't a riverbank today because you arrived, but after you leave, they will not be there anymore, and the constant groups will continue to cross. Do you use that as a success so far?
Well, I will tell you the facts, and the facts are these, and that is, first, and this is significant, there's only been one government official in the United States of America who has negotiated with and talked with Mexican officials about the border, and that's me. Our president, national leaders in the United States, they're not reaching out with Mexico and Mexican leadership to try to reach any type of solution whatsoever. The only one who has written agreements with signatures on those agreements is me. And then you talk to Director McCraw or talk to General Seltzer, and they will tell you about the joint operations they're doing, not today, but days before today. And we are having some results achieved out of it that did not exist before. Is it going to be perfect? We're still going to have challenges. We're going to have challenges as long as we're fighting against the government that's causing the problem with illegal immigration. As long as I'm having to fight back against the Biden administration that has these open border policies, we're going to be swimming upstream every single day. And we're going to be utilizing every single tool that we can, including increased assistance, I would say unprecedented assistance, from our partners in Mexico.
May deal with you with the National Guard as well. Since you're in communication with our Mexican counterparts, have they given any of you an assessment of how many people have crossed into Mexico that are preparing to come into the United States? I think that would be a significant number, considering the C-130 is on call, you know, in case of an emergency. And second question, there are some reports right now that DHS is going to allow family units to be exempt from Title 42 if they claim credible fear. Is that a concern for you as well, if that does pan out to be true?
So I'll answer the second question. Director McCraw may have more information on the first question. Listen, the inadequate enforcement of Title 42 by the Biden administration obviously is a concern, just as is a concern of the Biden administration's inadequate enforcement of the Remain in Mexico policy. And so what we're going to be doing, if the Biden administration refuses to fully and correctly enforce Title 42 the way that it currently exists, we'll be right back in court. We will be seeking sanctions and penalties against the United States of America, seeking to hold them in contempt of court if they refuse to enforce Title 42 the way that it exists. With regard to the numbers coming up from the south, I'll have Director McCraw answer that question.
Yes, we're aware, we're working with our governors in Mexico and the border states. There are migrants in these communities. They vary anywhere from 25,000 to 60,000, depending on where it is, depending on the information. Different ethnic backgrounds. All of them have been authorized by the federal government to be there, so they're concerned as well, just as well as our local officials are concerned here. They're concerned about those numbers in their states as well. Right now, we haven't seen any major movements of those across the border as we were anticipating with the elimination of Title 42, but we'll continue to monitor that and work with our federal partners, or at least our local partners across the river. And frankly, one of the things they have helped us with is to identify those and actually stop them before they get into Tamaulipas. Is very important. Before they get into Nuevo Leon, before they get into Coahuila. That's very important. Forget the river's important, but it's important for them to be proactive there, and they've been some, as it relates to wire is not cruel. The cartels are cruel in what they do to women and children.